Hello, everyone. I am Misty Decker, and it is 5:30 in the morning for me. So a bit early. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go through my new favorite book. Not so new anymore. It's been my favorite book for over a year. It's called Kill It with Fire. And the title is purposely a little bit incendiary because she's trying to get people to read about what to do with your older computer systems, mainframes, older applications, and how all of the things that need to be done with your legacy systems really also applies to your modern systems. I will go through this as fast as I can. It is a book review. I'm just going to give you some of my favorite highlights. Hopefully, the one thing you come away from this talk today is that you really need to read this book, because you really need to read this book. And I can already tell you now, I'm not going to be able to get through all of it. I'm just going to get through the first few chapters. So with that, let's start with next page. Marianne Bellotti is the author. She is amazing. She started in social science, studying social science, and she did computers on the side and ended up not getting her her international aid job, and turned out to be really, really good at computers and decided to stick with that. So this book, because of her background in modernizing the worst of the worst, which is the US government systems. They are some of the most neglected, outdated systems. And she was absolutely fascinated by the social situations that create that environment and the social situations that complicate the good efforts made to improve those systems. So she brings a uniquely something I haven't seen anybody else do in this space. She brings the technology along with the people, and she weaves those two things together. So let's go to the next page. Just really quick, she's got these fabulous little statements that you will find yourself using all of the time. This one is one of my favorites. Secretly, all software development is legacy modernization. Sounds fun. What does she really mean? If you think about it, I write a .NET application. The second I put it into production, it is legacy. It is now part of the legacy system. It is now a part of what is running my business. So when you need to make any software changes to that .NET application, it's a new world from when you wrote it the first time. You have to take into consideration how it changes the rest of your systems. What are those impacts across the environment? So all software development is basically legacy modernization. It's not just about mainframes and COBOL. So next page. All right, we build our computer systems the way we build our cities, over time, without a plan and on top of ruins. Have you ever heard this, story about Seattle and how the entire first floor of the buildings in Seattle, Washington, were turned into basements when they put in sewer systems? So all of the buildings that you see that are over a certain age, you're walking into the second floor. I'm sorry, I'm talking to the UK. The ground floor is now the basement, and the first floor is now the ground floor in all of the buildings in Seattle. We do this with our computer systems as well. It's not a replace altogether, build new, tear down the Empire State Building and build a brand new Empire State Building. You're building on top of that. And you don't always have a plan. You're reacting to what's going on today because you can't see the future. So this is a fantastic analogy for why our current technical systems are so complicated and have so many pieces involved. So the next page. This is a book about how to run legacy modernizations, a topic many software engineers regard as slow-moving suicide. I think you can relate to this statement. It's terrifying for some of these people to work on these systems and try to modernize them, in part because there's a long history of those modernization efforts failing, but also in part because modernizing legacy systems means that it's changing the jobs for people that work in that environment today. So, and it takes a long, long time. So it's not seen by many people as a fun, exciting project, although most everybody agrees it's absolutely necessary. So on the next page, I'm just going to give you just a quick highlight of the 9 chapters, what each chapter is about. We're not going to have time to go into all of them today. She talks a little bit about the history and how the current systems evolved, and then how that process informs modernization plans. So you need to understand how things evolve naturally so that you can understand how to evolve it in a more purposeful way in the future. She talks about technical debt. Where does it come from? Performance issues, system stability. What are those reasons for modernization? She talks about why modernization is so hard, and it's not technical reasons usually. Momentum as a critical feature of a modernization project. I'm going to hopefully get through all of that in our time today. Sorry. Early morning, I need my tea. So in chapter 6, she talks about how to correct modernization projects that have already started and they've gone off course. In 7, she talks about design thinking to improve those technical outcomes. Chapter 8 talks about breaking stuff and not being afraid of failure. That's a really fun chapter when she talks about just turning off a system you don't understand if anybody's using it. You know how in some companies you find like a server hiding under somebody's desk and you have no idea what it does, and you ask them and they say, I don't know what it does, but I've been afraid to turn it off. She says you should just turn it off. But you need to be prepared to monitor your system, your performance outcomes, and have a very robust recovery system so that you can play games like that and find what happens when you break things. And then, of course, there's the future-proofing piece, the maintainability, and how do you make sure you don't get caught into this situation again. So let's talk about chapter 1. Next page. Time is a flat circle, which is a really interesting statement. So this chapter 1 is all about the history, and this statement jumped out at me right away. She argues that technology doesn't go in cycles like everybody says. It goes in cycles that are more like a spiral, because it doesn't actually go back on itself. It just goes back to its similarities. So what do I mean? Let's take a look at the next page. How is the cloud any different from old-time sharing schemes on mainframes? So I've heard this from mainframers all the time. Cloud is just the mainframe by another name, right? So she agrees with that statement. Cloud isn't really any different from the time sharing on mainframes, right? We started with a thin client green screen terminal, right? And then we went to a fat client on the PC where the operations happened locally. And now with the cloud, we're going back to a thin client, often a web browser, where the compute is happening on somebody else's server. That sounds like a circle. But it's not exactly the same thing because cloud has differences to the mainframe in the types of services available, how you consume those services, and the basically unlimited capacity, whereas in the old mainframe time sharing, you had to actually schedule time sometimes, right? Because it was a limited, highly valued resource. So it's a circle, sort of, but it's really more of a spiral because they're parallels. So on the next page, let's take a look at this in another example. Technology advances not by building on what came before, but by pivoting from it. So if you take a look at the evolution of the mobile phone, you can see that those early phones were huge with tiny screens. And they gradually over time got to be smaller and smaller. And then as the applications changed, right? When all you were using it for was a phone, you didn't need a big screen and the technology wasn't there anyway. When that screen came about, when you could have a larger graphic and the applications started to become available, then you can see the evolution to larger and larger screens. All right, just checking the chat here. So this isn't a direct jump from one to the other. It's a slow movement. It's an evolution from one step to another based on what's going on. Now, the social scientist in her talks about this social science concept called alignable differences. It was fascinating to me. In the social concept of alignable differences, it says that we're better able to evaluate the value of features when they're comparable to something we already know, right? So I'm trying to sell you a new car, an electric vehicle, and you can compare. It's got all the same features in my gas vehicle. And now all I have to do is determine whether or not charging it at home fits with my lifestyle, whether the additional cost is worth it versus saving on gas. Those are things you can understand because you can compare. Now, if I'm trying to sell you teleporter technology, you have nothing to compare it to. I'm telling you it's going to cost $100,000. Is that going to make $100,000 difference in my life? Is it going to be $100,000 more valuable than my car? Am I going to use it enough for it to be worth that? I don't know. Is it going to feel safe? I don't know. I've never dealt with teleporter technology before. So with alignable differences, it's our brains understand things in terms of what we already know. And that's what leads to this evolution of technology. So that process in our brain is the fundamental thing underneath, which causes technology to evolve rather than innovate in massive leaps. So why did we migrate from time sharing on mainframes to bulky applications on a personal computer to time sharing on a commercial cloud? Well, we could, I'm quoting out of the book, by the way. We could have continued to develop mainframes until they became public clouds. Why didn't we do that? Well, why did we spend millions of dollars migrating thousands of applications to a new paradigm only to migrate them back to thinner clients a decade or two later? Changes in the costs of the machine itself, because that laptop was cheaper, so you could have a cheaper compute time right at a moment in time when people were using and adopting software more often. So there was a cost advantage that drove some of that. But there is also a network advantage. You had more and more traffic going on the network, and the network at that time wasn't built up to be able to handle it. So to be able to do those things locally ended up being a little bit cheaper from a compute point of view and faster from a network point of view. Those issues have since been resolved. And so now consuming compute externally with a very fast network that is now available is easier. And so the technology pivots and circles back in a spiral. All right, next page. So this is one I hear from people in the mainframe community and a lot. You should be picking technology based on what really is going to help the business and not based on fashion. She addresses that as well. When people assume that technology advances in a linear fashion, that is a logical conclusion that anything newer is naturally better and more advanced than whatever they're currently running. It's only because people don't understand the cyclical spiral nature of technology advancement that they believe new equals better, right? It isn't better, it's different. It's meeting a different need. Just like the fashion evolution for women. You can see how it evolves. It's not better over time, it's just changing. So on the next page, this is a fantastic quote on the next page. I'll go ahead and read it. Did I lose you all? Can you still hear me?
Still here, yeah.
Okay, next page, please. Are you changing? There we go. Okay. Changing technology. This is a great quote to share. And this is one of the reasons why you should really share the book with any leadership in your organization. Changing technology should be about real value and trade-offs, not faulty assumptions that newer is by default more advanced. So I think we in mainframes all agree with this statement. She backs it up with the social science and the technical history to prove the point. So on the next page, what does the history of the punch card tell us about technology today? So she dives into the history of the punch card a little bit. And her point is that technology evolves in a way that leverages what comes before. So if you don't know the history of the punch card, it came out of knitting machines. There were cards with holes in it that were used for weaving machines at the time when computers were being invented. And so they were able to take that technology and translate it to a device that would read the card and input it to the computer. The size of the card is based on the US banknote at the time. And the reason for that was they needed a way to organize the cards, and banks already had boxes with slots of that size. So if they printed the cards in that size, then they would be able to fit in the box. Through that evolution, we ended up with 80 character rows, right? But research has found that the human brain is more comfortable with 60 character rows. So take that note when you're writing your code. 60 character rows are easier for people to read and understand. Don't use all 80. But we still keep 80. And we kept 80 over time. And why? It's because it minimizes the differences to what people are familiar with. So those alignable differences it goes back to minimizing the amount of change in order to increase adoption rate. So people are already comfortable with 80, unless there's a really, really compelling reason, we're going to be sticking with 80. And another great example is the QWERTY keyboard. The standard keyboard, and I think it's the same in the UK, has QWERTY in the top characters in the very top row. And the reason for that, if you don't know, is that typewriters, manual typewriters, have these arms that go and hit the paper. And if you type really fast, the arm going to hit the paper can get caught on the arm coming back that just hit the paper. I am old enough to have done that. I have typed on manual typewriters when I paid my way through college as a secretary. I am that old. So to prevent that, they did an analysis of the English language for the most frequent characters, and they spread them out on the keyboard so that they were the furthest apart when you were typing, to reduce the possibility of those arms getting hit together. When we moved to electric keyboards and IBM invented the trackball, anyway, I forget what it's called, but it's a ball that will strike the paper. You didn't need to QWERTY keyboard anymore, but yet we kept it because everybody knows how to touch type. And you can't ever get rid of it. It makes no sense in today's world why we need a keyboard with the letters all mixed up, but yet we still keep it. It would be impossible to switch over. So here we are at truly new systems often need to cannibalize the interfaces of old systems to make those alignable differences. So research has found that even a single exposure to something significantly increases your affinity to it. So let's talk about the value of our skills programs and IBM's really amazing academic outreach programs. When you get those students, when they get those young people comfortable with COBOL, you'll be comfortable with it for the rest of your life. People who went through university and never ever touched COBOL, the first time they encounter it, it makes them feel really weird. And they come away with the impression that this is a bad language, which is really, it's a programming language. There's nothing bad about it. It's just different. And they're not comfortable with it because they don't have any alignable differences, anything to relate it to, because it is structured so differently. So the lesson learned here is that systems that feel familiar provide more value than the systems with better elegance or features. So rather than fighting against and telling people, well, the only reason you're saying that about COBOL is because you've never touched it before, let's find a way to make them comfortable with it. Let's give them that opportunity to be exposed to it instead of just telling them to get over what is a really fundamental part of our brains. So let's talk a little bit about COBOL on the next page. COBOL was invented by a very diverse team of programmers, women, men, various ethnicities. It's the original open source programming language. It came out of a committee, Codicil, looking to address a real business need, which was to have a single programming language that could run on any platform. At that time, all of the programming languages were hardware specific to that particular server. So COBOL is the original open source programming language. It is the original platform independent. If you look at it from that perspective, it was light years ahead of its time from some of these really modern projects that are happening now. And it was adopted quite quickly because of those alignable differences. Grace Hopper insisted that it be written in English language with full words and not little keywords. So you didn't have to learn a new language to write COBOL. It was still very comfortable for people that could read and write English. So in that way, COBOL became very highly adopted, even by people that didn't go to university and study programming languages. Parallel, scientific languages and academic languages were coming out of the university space. Scientific languages like Fortran were coming out of the scientific community, and it's very formula-like. It's very similar to what they were used to dealing with, which was mathematical formulas. And the academic languages out of the computer science disciplines in universities is very keyword-like, because that's what they were comfortable with. As people graduated university and were first made comfortable with programming with those other languages, that is now their preference. It has nothing to do with functionality or capability. It has to do with what they learned on. And other languages that are similar to that, that are less of a pivot from what they first learned and what they first became comfortable with, is going to be more comfortable to them. So alignable differences affects us throughout all of our technology. We think we're making logical, independent choices, and that your opinion of your favorite programming language is based solely on the practical things that you argue about on Reddit all the time. I'm sorry to tell you, quite a large percentage of your personal preference is based on your animal instincts and alignable differences. So on the next page, she warns us to be aware of artificial consistency. So artificial consistency means that we restrict design patterns to a small pool of options across the organization that can be standardized and repeated throughout the architecture, irregardless of whether or not it provides technical value. A lot of large organizations are attracted to this because everything is done in so many different ways. It's really hard to control it and to manage it. And you're not always getting the best decisions because a lot of our decision-making, even our technical decision-making, is driven by preferences and those unconscious feelings. So she gives an example of how Node.js and React.js are both forms of JavaScript, right? And so they look consistent. So you might feel that the best languages to implement in your organization to interact with JavaScript would be Node.js or React.js. But it just because they're both forms of JavaScript doesn't mean that Node.js has an edge when interacting with React.js over any other backend language. So just because they look the same doesn't mean they're going to be the best technical compatibilities. So when you're deciding between when consistency is providing value and reducing complexity, and when it is just causing technical issues, is one of the hardest decisions engineers can make. So on the next page, she recommends that when you're going about a modernization project, the first thing you do is look at the people who are maintaining the system. Now, she modernized some of the biggest, hairiest systems in the US government, wrote a book about it, and in her years of experience, she found that the interviews she had with the people that maintain the system were always the most enlightening, because they knew where the system was most fragile, most likely to fail, where the system was most in need of modernization, right? It makes a lot of sense. Don't start with the engineers that own the system, start with the people that are constantly fixing it and maintaining it. The engineers that own the system are really forward-looking and looking at new features. The people maintaining the system are the ones that are trying to keep the lights on and know where modernization needs to happen. On the next page, I have shared this point with so many people. This is one of those things in this book that I was like, duh. When you put it that way, it just makes so much sense. Engineers are rewarded for inventing something new, but technology is more likely to be successful if it builds on common things. So if you learned one thing from all of the alignable differences, it's that pivoting a little bit off of what we already have and growing it from there, you'll be more likely to have it adopted and be successful. But yet, we still get people saying, well, there's this new technology, so we need to completely rewrite all of that with this new programming language, or with this new service, or this new way of doing development, whatever. And we need to drop everything and start over. Why would people say that when they're also got this whole alignable differences going on? Well, that's because unconsciously you want to be rewarded. They don't realize that they're justifying their own personal success, but that is what they're doing. You are naturally, you as a human being are naturally drawn to those things where you get rewarded for, and you are rewarded for being the first, because everybody in the room goes, oh, look at what she did. She's the first to do this thing. Bravo. And you see that, and you now want to be that person. So we need to make sure that we're constantly checking ourselves. Are we recommending a new technical strategy because it's the right thing, because it's the thing that's actually going to move the organization forward? Or are we recommending a new technology because it's new and because we're convincing ourselves that it's better because unconsciously we know we will be rewarded? So the next page, let's talk about an update versus a full rewrite. So this is a question a lot of organizations ask themselves when they're looking at individual systems. Very often they're mainframe systems and their mainframe applications. Do I want to just get rid of my COBOL? Do I want to just get rid of my mainframe application and rewrite something that does the same function over on the cloud in new modern programming language? Or should I update what I've already got to do the new features? The answer isn't always straightforward. And it's important to know that organizations hold these two projects to a different standard. When you write a whole brand new application, you get a minimum viable product, right? An MVP. And the organization is okay with that. But the update, you're expected to have everything. So the full rewrite seems very exciting. Woohoo, we'll start over, because the ambiguity isn't really, isn't well understood versus the risks. You understand what you already have. You understand the risks of updating it. You understand what you're going to be getting into. But the full rewrite just is a whole new world of possibilities. So on the next page, I have this big red flag as well. What I say is, if you tell me your business strategy for your IT systems is cloud, that's not a business strategy, right? That's possibly the solution to your business strategy, but what is it you're trying to accomplish with your IT systems? Are you trying to deliver new ways for customers to interact with you? Are you trying to deliver new features and functions more quickly? What is your business strategy that you're trying to accomplish? Cloud may be the technical answer, but those companies that say our strategy is cloud are skipping over the most important step. So she phrases it this way. A big red flag for me is when people talk about the phases of their modernization plans in terms of what technologies they are going to use rather than the value they will add. She recommends that you modernize by saying, we want this, we want to reduce turnaround from feature requirements to feature delivery down to 90 days. And it's currently 6 months. Okay, go through and innovate that, push that through the system. That is a modernization project, not we want to implement DevOps. Why? What are you accomplishing? You need to focus on the value. DevOps might be the way that you're solving that and delivering, reducing your turnaround time on feature to delivery. But you need to focus on the value and not on the technologies. All right, next page. We've been talking for 40 minutes, and that's just the first 2 chapters. And I hope you're as excited as I am about the value of those first 2 chapters. We'll see how much of the rest of it I can get through in the available time. So let's start diving into chapter 3, evaluating your architecture. So on the next page, there are 3 principles that she advocates for when developing a strategy. First, those modernizations should be based on adding value, not chasing new technology. We've already mentioned that. She explained why. Familiar interfaces help speed up adoption. You've already heard that. And people gain awareness of interfaces and technology through their networks and not necessarily by popularity. Now, this is a very interesting one. If you are in a certain community, you are going to be more aligned towards a certain way of programming, a certain way of working. I'm sure you've seen this in your own careers already, that there's different communities and camps. You're here at GSC, so you're part of the mainframe community within the broader IT community. So you become aware of tools and technologies that you can use through people that you know, and not necessarily what's most popular in the world. So on the next page, she dives into why organizations feel the need to move forward and modernize. And it comes down into 3 main categories. The first is technical debt. Next is performance issues, and the last is system stability. So let me talk about each of these a little bit at a time. Technical debt on the next page. It can happen at any age of a product. It's not necessarily something that's specific to older technology. It can very easily happen to over technology because all of these things can happen over time. But she's had to modernize brand new 6-month-old software at a startup. So just because the technology, just because the software is new, doesn't mean it doesn't need modernization, because it can happen as the result of subpar trade-offs. All of technology and new technology advancements are based on trade-offs. So maybe you only partially migrated to something instead of finishing the job. Maybe you've had to implement some quick patches, and maybe you have some out-of-date dependencies. These things build up over time. It can build up over decades. It can build up over months, to the point where you feel you need to address it. So on the next page, she isn't proposing that you always start from scratch, but she does like to use a thought experiment. If you were starting from scratch, what would the system do, right? So not to the, am I going to use the mainframe? Am I going to use cloud? Am I going to use COBOL? Am I going to use Java question yet? Start with, what would the system do? Is it functioning and delivering the value the business needs? Starting from the business needs. So with that thought experiment, you can build out an understanding of what the system would do and compare it to what it's already doing. And that's how you can identify what really needs to be implemented. Then she dives in on the next page to COBOL, right? So the problem with most COBOL systems is that they were designed when COBOL was the only option. So COBOL she's got this fabulous article I reshared recently. She calls it How COBOL is Holding You Hostage with Math. And she proves, you have to read it because she actually goes through the code and she proves how COBOL is better at financial transactions than any other programming language, and more accurate. And she shows how the accuracy varies over time and over computations, and how COBOL stays more accurate than other languages. So COBOL is actually better for certain tasks, but it's not the best choice for everything. And certainly not everything it's doing today. That happened because COBOL was chosen. It was the only option, and it's what people were comfortable with at the time, right? So some of those COBOL systems do legit need to be rewritten. And a lot of them, it's not worth the cost to rewrite it because it's working fine. Or COBOL is actually the better tool for the job. So on the next page, you're now to the next step. You've done your thought experiment. If I were writing this, this today, what would it do? You figured out what those functions are that you need it to do. And now you compare your current solution to the new options. If you were to provide this function today, how would you do it? Would you use COBOL? Maybe, because it's better in some ways. Maybe there's another language that you would use. Maybe there's another system. Maybe you would think that there's value and benefits of having it on the cloud instead of on your current mainframe. But you get there logically without the emotion by going through these steps. But it's important to note that there's applications on the mainframe, just as there's applications written in COBOL because it was the only option at the time. There's applications on the mainframe that are not benefiting from the unique capabilities of the mainframe. So we need to figure out what is it that is going to be the best served by staying in place on the mainframe, and what are those functions, not those applications, those functions that are best served elsewhere. And by going through this process, you can figure it out. Sometimes the new tech is a better way to solve the problem. But I've decided if I were to build this today, I would write it in Java on the cloud. But how much more value am I going to get out of that? So now you have to go to the next step, right? If I were to do that and rewrite everything, is it worth the cost to move? Am I going to get enough of a benefit for it to be worth migrating over? So you need to go through all of these steps. After you go through all of those hurdles, there will be some things that come out and say, yes, it's better to move it. Yes, it's better to rewrite it. You will get some things that say, yes, it needs new functions, but it's not worth moving it or rewriting it. It's worth updating it where it is. This is how you get down to migrating. So let's talk on the next page about performance issues. Few organizations are motivated to do anything about legacy systems until they start affecting the business side and work starts to slow down. Can I tell you how many medium-sized companies, small companies that I have talked to, systems engineers that are so frustrated about the lack of investment in the core mainframe technologies that run the organization. Large organizations tend to be better, but those medium organizations, government institutions, certainly, they struggle with getting the investment needed to maintain these systems. And they know, you're looking at this stuff every day, you know, it's gonna break. it's getting to the point where things are basically hacked together and we need to do something before something breaks. Well, leadership has, I can either make more money, I can either invest to make more money, or I can invest to prevent a theoretical future problem. This is the same thing that government struggles with all the time. Voters don't want to pay to repair a bridge that they already have. They're very excited to build a new bridge. So this is human nature. So it's performance issues that often end up being that flag that you can raise up to management and say, look at this. This is impacting business. Work is slowing down. We have to address this problem. So on the next page, stability issues. I hope you get to modernize before you have stability issues. But certainly when things start just shutting down, like a lot of organizations saw in the pandemic, that definitely drives attention to the need to modernize. And she talks about how there's two common characteristics of systems that experience frequent failures. They are tightly coupled and they are complex. So what do we mean by that? Tightly coupled means that all of the pieces, you can't change pieces independently, like the opposite of microservices. So they're not isolated independent entities with well-documented interfaces. They're tightly coupled. So if you change this, you really have to know how it's going to impact everything else in the system. A tightly coupled system is often a monolith, for example, is automatically tightly coupled. And complex means it's got lots of layers to it, lots of different technologies. Those things don't always go together. A monolith by nature is not complex. If that's what you're running your business on, is a single monolith. And she cites examples of a startup that started with one single massive monolith. It was fast, it was quick and easy to build. The system wasn't very large yet, so it was not very complex. It worked fantastic for the business. As the business grows and you need to add in complexity, you need to start decoupling systems, which creates some development complexity. Microservices, you know, they're not the savior to all problems, because you now have to have manage that complexity of keeping all of these systems independent. Whereas if you have a monolith in a shared database, just have at it. Everybody's sharing the same database. So those two pieces together can create those stability issues and make it very, very hard to solve the problem. And tightly coupled systems are like a monolith, usually reduce complexity, and a loosely coupled systems are usually more complex. So on the next page, I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anyone in any organization. The only rule of modernizing legacy systems is that there are no silver bullets. You will often see vendors, and I'm in marketing now, and I will call out marketing. Marketing for a lot of vendors will try to claim that their solution will solve all your problems. And I won't call out specific companies, but at least for my company, now OpenText, by the way, we're now OpenText. Micro Focus is now OpenText. We don't push the silver bullet. We talk about the complexity of choosing your own path. And you know, there's a number of other vendors that do talk about that as well. So certainly it's very important as you are engaging on your modernization journey that you understand every journey is unique, because your system is unique, your endpoint is unique. There's no way to have a single path in between those that's the same for different endpoints on either end. So let's go through some of these options. Option 1, full rewrite on the next page. With a full rewrite, the big question is, what do you do with the current system in the often years, these projects can take years, that it takes the new system to develop? So you can either update both systems in parallel, or you can stop all new development. Well, from a business point of view, no business is going to want to not have any new development on their core systems while they're in parallel rewriting an entirely new system. That certainly works if you're able to break out the work into smaller pieces. But when you're talking about projects that are large and of scale, it's impractical to have a business not be able to respond to customer needs for a year or 2 years and not lose business. So the other option is to update both systems in parallel. Now, here's the other one that made me say, oh, duh. I don't know why I never saw it this way before. On the next page, she makes the point that the full rewrite affects the culture. So a full rewrite, let's spell this out. You work on the legacy system. You've been at your company for 15, 20 years. You're an expert on that legacy system. You've had a really wonderful career. Management comes in and says, we're going to get rid of all of that technology. We're going to stand up this Tiger team over here. They're going to build a whole new system that's going to replace that. And we want you to just keep the lights on for the next 1.5 years, 2 years, while they're building the new thing. That's our future. What are you hearing? You're hearing, I'm getting fired. I'm being asked to do stupid work that's not important to the company. My career is over, and you're gonna either leave and the company's gonna be stuck without anybody able to maintain their current systems or any plan to go back. Or you're gonna find ways to kind of shuttle the project, whether it's consciously or unconscious, right? You might be like secretly going whenever they make a stupid mistake over on that Tiger team, instead of helping them out, instead of pointing out issues and helping them succeed. So the full rewrite, when done in its worst form, causes major cultural rifts. On the next page, option 2, iteration in place. So iteration in place really needs these 3 things in order to be successful. Monitoring. That means before you start changing the core system, you need to make sure you have a really robust monitoring system so that you understand and instrument it throughout the entire system what's happening, so that as you make changes, you can see the effects on the rest of the system. And you need to have robust testing in place so that you can ensure that the results are consistent. And you need to have robust recovery, because as you're changing the core systems, you're going to have times when you make mistakes and things don't go the way you expect. You have the monitoring, you see it happening, and now you need to go back and you need to have a robust recovery to be able to go backwards and respond to that situation. With those 3 things in place, if they are thorough and robust, you should be safe and secure in turning off that machine that's hiding underneath somebody's desk that nobody thinks is being used, but nobody knows. So you would see the effects of that pretty quickly, and you'd be able to recover pretty quickly. So those 3 things in place are the groundwork to being able to iterate in place. Then there's option 3, monolith to the service-oriented architecture, split in place. So for example, moving from monolith to service-oriented architecture, or taking a tightly coupled system to a loosely coupled system. So the main difference from iteration in place is that you're splitting off the service before, so that you're reducing the coupling, so that you're reducing the impacts. And you can integrate it back into the system, but you have to ensure that those connections between the services are working. So I see that we're running out of time. As I said, we are not able to get through all of this. These decks are going to be available right now.
Yes, I believe. Have you uploaded them to the GSE agenda?
Yeah, I will do that. I will do that as soon as we hang up. I'll upload those.
Or alternatively, if anyone wants to email myself or Misty, we're more than able to sort of send them over and forward them across. I've just seen Rune's message about the conference reference number for session evaluation. So sorry to interrupt you, Misty. I know you were in the flow.
No, I'm done.
What I will do is I will just quickly stop the share.
No, it's on the last page.
I'll have to sort of skip.
So go to page 48 really quick. I just want to point out that I give you some links here. Marianne Bellotti has a website. She also is now teaching courses in modernization. We have a modernization maturity model that has a broader view of all of these modernization options. We also have a white paper about breaking a monolith into microservices. I wrote an article about unconscious bias towards technology choices, and mainframe modernization is now mainstream. So there's some nice links for you. And on the next page is the session evaluation.
There you are. That answers the question.
60. I followed your instructions.
And with credit it's due to Misty. Mainframe modernization is without a doubt her forte, one of her many fortes. She did a session for us in November, which was fantastic, and I can tell that this is a topic that it's not going anywhere, because so many places are resistant to modernize, and still to this day unsure of what modernizing really means, or what the standardized expression is. So that's where Misty is, as I say, the subject matter expert without a doubt.
I will add, thank you, Nat. If anybody's interested in this topic and wants to participate in moving modernization forward, I've just launched through the Open Mainframe Project a modernization working group. And before I upload these charts, I'll add that link. You can volunteer to be on that working group, where we will be collecting thought leadership material and creating a central curated repository, not vendor specific, open source thought leadership around modernization and what you need to do, and what your options are. And you can join. Anybody can join. Yeah,
and I would recommend it, because as I say, this is a really important topic, and I think for some places it is an afterthought, unfortunately, but it shouldn't be.
Right. It's an opportunity to show leadership in your own organization. Even the most senior people are not really thinking about what to do in the future. They're thinking in all of these patterns that I just showed you. So you're way ahead already.
Well, we've already had someone who said they've ordered the book. So clearly Misty's made a great impression here. I probably will order it as well, because as someone who's new to the mainframe industry, this is something that I think would be a fantastic way for me to sort of set myself apart and actually to learn a lot. But by all means, order the book as and how you're interested, but please do also submit session feedback. As I said, in the last session we hosted 6A, it's invaluable for the GSE sort of organization, but also it's really valuable for speakers like Misty, giving them an opportunity to get constructive criticism, find areas that they're really happy with and they've got a strength in, and maybe areas that they could improve. Not that I think there was anything that could be improved other than me interrupting at the end. Sorry again. But yeah, please do submit the feedback, because that's very useful for all of us. And thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you to Misty for a fantastic session, and to everyone who's here. Have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Misty. Fantastic session. I'm just sorry to have to cut it short, because
No, no, no. I did that same session at Share, and I didn't get through all the charts there either. That's why I started by saying I was going to get through as much as I could.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I stopped. I didn't even finish writing charts for all of the chapters because I was like, this is already over an hour. Maybe someday I'll do like a full book review, but I think it would be a book about a book. That's probably not the best plan.
Well, you could do. So I just spoke to Mark Wilson recently about writing for Planet Mainframe. So you could always ask if they'd be interested in having a review of a book on there, or maybe even like a WordPress.
Oh no, there's definitely places I could publish it. I know Tech Channel would take it.
Yeah.
I could publish it on my own blog. That's easy enough. The point is that it would be a 50-page book review about a 100-page book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's just so much in there. Then I thought about doing like a series of book reviews where I spend an entire blog on each chapter, and I just didn't feel like I had the time to invest in that. But hey, if you want to do it,
me,
just anybody on here, I'm looking, there's still people hanging out, just listening to us. Anybody on here wants to sign up to do a series of blogs, I will 100% get you published on Tech Channel, or Planet Mainframe if you'd rather go there,
yeah.
or the Open Mainframe Projects blog. We could put it there. Honestly, I'd rather put it on the Open Mainframe Project because then it draws in people to the Modernization Working Group, which is brand new.
But I think I mean I'm very interested in that actually. Although yeah, I think like you were saying, it's a testament to Marion Bellotti's work that there's that much you can kind of extrapolate from it and can, you know.
Yeah.
It is yeah, it's definitely a book that I'm going to need to order. Although I've got such a long like yet to read and yet to watch on Netflix list that yeah, I've got a long road ahead
This
of me.
one, this one was such an easy read. Like I have a hard time reading technology books, but this one's so fascinating because she weaves in all of the sociology pieces to it and the personal stories. I actually took it on my vacation, and it was my vacation read. And I wasn't at all sorry. Like I had the science fiction novel next to me, and my family's like, why are you working on vacation? I go, this does not feel like working. This is like, praise Jesus, somebody's finally saying it.
But I think that's great though, isn't it? When you're doing something that is arguably related to work, where it doesn't feel like a chore, it doesn't feel like, you know, oh, I don't have a delegate badge. I really enjoyed the session. Thank you very, very much for passing that feedback on. We'll see if we can maybe anonymize some feedback and put it in. Yeah, I'm sorry about that delegate issue.
Yeah, I don't know that but I know who that is. Hi, Julia. And thank you. So good.
Misty, are you attending later today? There's a Women in Technology panel, which Resley Costabel's in. She was attending earlier.
I wasn't invited, and I saw it, and I was thinking about attending, but honestly, I was actually glad you scheduled me for so early in the morning, because ever since the acquisition, my calendar has been like a mess. I don't think I'm going to be able to peel off time during any daylight hours.
Okay.
And I may not even have internet access. So
that's fair
yeah,
enough.
I have a whole lot of stuff I have to do for my new organization.
What's I mean, yeah, that's I with the Women's Technology panel, I'll be attending that. But I was saying to Aileen that hopefully we'll do a bit of a collaboration between 101 and Women in Technology during the next event in November 2023. I'm not sure if you're expected to come to that, but I mean, I'll be there in Wilbury Hall.
I have to figure out what my new organization wants me to do.
Okay, that's all right.
You know, so I've already asked about my conference cycle, and my new boss was like, well, we need you to prioritize. And I'm like, yeah, we need to talk about the impact that I'm having out there, and what we're doing, what our goal is. So we'll see. We'll have to see.
That's fair enough. Well,
yeah.
Congratulations again. Sorry, I forgot to mention it earlier. I probably should have led with that on the acquisition. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
It's looking like it's going to be a really, really good thing. I really like the people in the company so far. Of all of the meetings that I've been invited to, all of the work that I've done and engaged with them, and it's been a week, 80% of the effort has been around the people, making sure the people are assimilated.
good. Yeah.
Technology issues. Do you understand our company? Do you understand how you fit in our company? Celebrating Micro Focus, educating OpenText on what Micro Focus does, educating Micro Focus on what OpenText does, and only 20% has been outward facing.
I think it's good. It's good that though, because sometimes
amazing
mergers and acquisitions, they can feel very much like a you're doing our work, or just come in here and crack on. And it,
yeah.
I like
and
the idea.
We're just going to take your revenue. You know, you just come in here, you just keep on doing what you're doing, and we're just going to take your revenue. But that's not their strategy. They are very much about combining our technologies to the benefit of our customers. And I'm already all over that, because I think mainframe applications should be leveraging some of the technologies like the analytics and the software as a service that they offer through OpenText, should be integrated into those core applications a lot better than they are. And so I'm going to be trying to drive some of that.
Well, I was going to ask, while I've got you, I know like everyone here is probably going to start to filter away over the next few minutes, but we did I did want to do a session, if you would be able to, or if you know someone else in Micro Focus who might be interested. I know you've done sessions on sort of allyship and inclusivity before. I was wondering if you or anyone else from Micro Focus might be interested in doing that for us in November. I was actually hoping to have Glenn Anderson does that session. Most people can hear if you can listen, and I thought that would be a really good opportunity to lead into a lot of people struggle to listen, and people most especially don't listen to minority or marginalized groups, and obviously women in technology and women in IT are generally a minority. So I thought that was a really good way to sort of feed into how can we pay more attention and help support that community, support and sort of promote, breaking the glass ceiling, etc. So
yeah, so some of the sessions that I've done in the diversity space have been around unconscious bias.
Exactly.
I did a whole session on unconscious bias and strategies to counter your own unconscious bias. So now you've become aware that everybody's biased. It's just what we're biased about is different. How do you identify when you're biased? How do you identify when your bias might be hurting the people around you accidentally? And then how can you address that yourself, right? So how do you, it's how can you be a better colleague?
Yes.
So I have that session. I've also done it as a open conversation where I put topics up on the board, and I invite people in the audience to share their perspective in an open and respectful way, and I moderate the conversation. That went really, really well. I mean, it sounds like a huge risk because people could get really contentious, but everyone was really respectful and they shared their feelings. And we had somebody say, I don't like it when you call us guys because I'm a woman, and that tells me I'm not part of the group. And a gentleman said, that's not how we mean it. And we had that conversation, and eyes on both sides were opened, and
exactly.
So it was really good. So that's another one I do. Most recently, I did one that at Share that somebody took issue with the title. It was navigating the minefield, the role of white males in improving diversity.
I think you did that
So-
last year, didn't you?
Oh, I did do it last
Yeah.
year? Okay. And I did another one about white males wanted the role of white males as mentors.
Oh, sorry, no, that was the one you did. You did that GSC, didn't
Oh,
you?
okay.
Yeah. I can
So that
understand why
was-
someone might be offended, but the whole point is, you know, with the majority. So
I'm at a conference where 80% of the people are white males, and everybody going to the diversity topics are the diversity people and like 3 white males. And we all know that diversity issues are not going to be solved by the minority. And so what I've started trying to do is trying to find a way that engages, and we found research that found that the majority of white males care about diversity, they just don't know what they can do about it.
yeah,
And they feel left out of the conversation because there's nothing I can do. This is, you know, this is something out of my control. So I'm trying to empower the men in the organizations and in the community to engage constructively and in a way that doesn't blame them, because, you know, they're not at fault, right?
sometimes it's more like
has
ignorance, isn't
evolved
it?
over time, and a lot of this is unconscious.
Yeah.
Yes, I will agree. There are a small number of white males out there that are like, white males will rule the world and you all women just need to get in line. Fair enough. There's a small number, but they're the minority. And I'm trying to reach the majority that really want to engage and help form a more equal world and empower them to do so. So I have those ready to go.
If you are able to after the kind of acquisition able to find the time for it, would really appreciate that. It would probably be Wednesday the 1st of November, but if you're not and there's anyone you'd like to sort of put forward in your place, yeah, would really appreciate it, because I think that's such an important topic. And you know, I think I know you've spoken about it before, but obviously I trust your judgment if there's someone else you think is.
There's a person that's listening right now and they know that I'm looking at them. So
should I unmute them, or
I'll just leave it. No, there's a mentee of mine on the line right now.
okay.
So we will have that conversation. If they're up for it. I'm not sure. So no, I will look into that. Yeah, GSC and whether or not I'm going to GSC is definitely one of my questions. So November 1st is good to know.
Yeah. So Megan, fascinating discussion. I need to close the room soon. Yes, of course. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Megan needs to close the room soon. We've got to hand it over to the next. Thank you very much for your time, Misty, and thank you everyone for attending. And yeah, I'll speak to you soon, Misty, and thank you for your patience, Megan. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.